This is shared property. Let us out! That was the HOA president screaming when I pressed one button and the gate slammed shut. 30 luxury cars were suddenly trapped inside my backyard, engines idling, music cutting off mid-beat, champagne glasses frozen in mid-air as people realized the exit was gone. 5 minutes earlier, the HOA had rolled into my private pool like it was a pop-up resort. Phones out, live streaming, charging strangers money for exclusive access to a space I built for disabled kids. And right at the center of it all stood the HOA president, red-faced, pounding on the steel bars, still yelling that she owned the place. What the HOA didn't know was that every entrance to this property had just been reprogrammed under a brand new access system, and I still had full control of it. That was the moment their party turned into a problem they couldn't scream their way out of. What would you do if entitled neighbors invaded your sanctuary? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how a foster kid with nothing became the guy who could cage 30 socialites with the push of a button. I'm Dr. Marcus Stone, but everyone calls me Max, trauma surgeon at Metro General. The path here wasn't pretty. 12 different foster homes before I turned 18. Sleeping on garage floors, eating cereal for dinner, wearing hand-me-downs that never fit right. But here's what poverty teaches you. Nothing is guaranteed. Everything you get, you earn. Every meal, every roof, every chance at something better. So when I finally made it through medical school, working 3 jobs and sleeping in the hospital library, I promised myself something. I'd build a space where kids like me could feel safe. Not charity, not pity, just safe. That's why I spent $80,000 on a therapeutic pool. Not for myself. For kids with muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, children whose bodies fight them every day, who need warm water and gentle resistance to move without pain. The pool sits behind my house in Emerald Hills HOA. Beautiful neighborhood, old money, new money, and whatever category I fell into. Earned money, the kind that comes with scars. But apparently, earned money doesn't buy you respect from people like Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross. Anastasia inherited $50 million, never worked a day in her life, married into another $50 million just for fun. And 6 months ago, she bought her way into becoming our HOA president through strategic donations and influence peddling. The smell of her perfume, something French that costs more than most people's rent, hit you before she even spoke. Everything about her screamed money without purpose. Designer clothes that cost more than my first car, jewelry that could fund a small hospital wing. But here's what really made my skin crawl. She looked at my pool like it was wasted on me. I first noticed her attention 3 weeks ago. She'd walk by during the kids' therapy sessions, watching through the fence. Not the warm curiosity of someone who loves children. The calculating stare of someone measuring square footage. Then came the questions, casual at first. That's such a large pool for one person. Do you really need all that space? Have you considered the community benefit of sharing such lovely amenities? The sound of her voice carried that particular tone rich people use when they want something. Sweet on the surface, poisonous underneath. Last week, she approached me directly. Marcus, darling, I've been thinking about neighborhood wellness initiatives. Your pool could be such a wonderful community resource. I explained about the therapy programs, the specialized equipment, the insurance requirements, the fact that it was, my private property. She laughed, actually laughed. Oh, sweetie, beautiful spaces belong to beautiful people. Surely someone with your background understands the importance of sharing with those who can truly appreciate luxury. The taste of old rage filled my mouth, the same flavor I'd swallowed in 12 different foster homes when adults decided what was mine wasn't really mine. But I stayed calm, surgical calm. It's not for sharing, Anastasia. It's for healing. How wonderfully noble, she said, already dismissing me. We'll see about that. And that's when I should have known this woman was about to turn my sanctuary into a war zone. 3 days later, I found out exactly what "we'll see about that" meant. I'd been at the hospital for 16 hours straight. 3 trauma cases, including a 10-year-old hit by a drunk driver. The kind of day that reminds you why you became a doctor and why every muscle in your body wants to quit. I pulled into my driveway at 2 a.m., still wearing surgical scrubs, and heard music coming from my backyard. Not just any music. a full-string quartet playing Brahms while 30 people in evening wear sipped champagne around my therapeutic pool. The smell of truffle oil and expensive wine mixed with the chlorine I carefully balanced for children's sensitive skin. Crystal stemware floated in the water like luxurious pollution, disrupting the filtration system I maintained for kids who couldn't afford contamination. But that wasn't the worst part. Anastasia had turned my sanctuary into a business. A professional catering staff served hors d'oeuvres. A bartender mixed drinks at a floating bar anchored to my pool's shallow end, and a sign by the gate read, "Exclusive Aquatic Experience, $750 per person." I walked over to Anastasia, who was holding court near the diving board where little Sarah practiced her water therapy 3 times a week. "What the hell is this?" She turned, and for a split second, I saw genuine surprise in her eyes, like she'd forgotten this was my property. "Marcus, how wonderful! I was hoping you'd join us." She gestured grandly at the chaos. "Welcome to our inaugural community wellness soiree. This isn't community anything, this is my private pool." The laughter that escaped her lips sounded like breaking crystal. "Oh, darling, don't be silly. This is clearly an underutilized community resource. Look how much joy it's bringing to everyone." She reached into her purse and pulled out a $20 bill. "Here's a little something for your trouble. Thanks for being so accommodating to your betters." The paper felt like acid in my palm. $20. For my $80,000 therapeutic pool. From someone who probably spent more than that on her manicure. I'd read somewhere that property liability insurance gets voided the moment you allow unauthorized commercial use. One slip, one injury during Anastasia's party, and I could lose everything. The house, the pool, my ability to help kids who needed it most. "You need to leave, now, all of you." Anastasia's smile never wavered. "I don't think so, sweetie. You see, I've done my research." She produced a folder from somewhere. HOA bylaws clearly state that private amenities can be utilized for community benefit during emergency situations. What emergency? Neighborhood wellness crisis, obviously. So many residents lacking access to proper recreational facilities. It's practically a public health emergency. I looked around at 30 people who collectively owned more wealth than some small countries, sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than my monthly mortgage payment. These people aren't lacking recreational facilities. That's not for you to decide. Anastasia's voice gained an edge. I'm the HOA president, elected to make decisions for community welfare, and I've decided that this space serves the greater good. The conversation had attracted attention. Other guests gathered around and I could see phones coming out. Nothing rich people love more than recording conflict for their social media feeds. Besides, Anastasia continued, her voice carrying now, beautiful spaces belong to beautiful people. Surely someone with your background understands that some things are simply beyond your proper stewardship. There it was, the real reason. Not community wellness or neighborhood benefit, just the simple belief that poor kids don't deserve beautiful things. But here's what Anastasia didn't know. While she was explaining my unworthiness to her audience, I'd noticed something. She wasn't just hosting one party, she was taking reservations. I overheard her on the phone with someone. "Yes, darling, we can accommodate your group next month. Same price point. The aquatic experience has been such a success." This wasn't impulse or entitlement, this was business. She was literally monetizing my property, turning my kids' therapy space into her personal revenue stream. And she'd just made the mistake of doing it in front of witnesses. The next morning brought consequences I hadn't expected. My phone rang at 6 a.m. Dr. Richards, chief of staff at Metro General, his voice tight with concern. "Max, I need to ask you about some calls we've been receiving." "What kind of calls?" "Concerned citizens, reporting that one of our surgeons is being difficult about community cooperation. Something about refusing to share medical facilities with disabled children." The twisting in my stomach felt familiar. Foster care familiar. Adults deciding your story without asking for your version. "Sir, that's not what..." "I'm not saying I believe it, Max. I'm saying we need to address it before it becomes a problem. Hospital board doesn't like controversy." After I hung up, I found 3 voicemails from the HOA management company. Anastasia had filed a formal complaint against me for community obstruction and antisocial behavior. The complaint was a masterpiece of manipulation. According to her version, I was a bitter, antisocial doctor who refused to allow disabled children from the neighborhood to access my underutilized private amenities. The therapeutic pool became evidence of my selfishness, not my generosity. She'd also included photos. Me confronting her at 2 a.m. in surgical scrubs, looking exhausted and angry. Her guests, well-dressed and smiling, being denied access to community wellness resources. Context, apparently, was optional. By noon, I had 17 missed calls from neighbors. The Nextdoor app exploded with posts about my hostility toward community building and suspicious behavior toward families with disabled children. The smell of manipulation hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Everything true, but twisted until it suffocated the actual truth. But Anastasia wasn't done. At 3 p.m., she knocked on my door with 2 HOA board members and a folder thick enough to choke a horse. "Marcus, we need to discuss your compliance with community standards." The board members looked uncomfortable. Jim Patterson owned the auto shop, good guy, honest work. Michelle Torres taught high school math, neither of them comfortable with whatever script Anastasia had prepared. "According to HOA regulations," Anastasia continued, reading from her folder, "any private amenity that could serve community welfare may be subject to shared use provisions during declared emergencies." "What emergency?" "I've declared a neighborhood wellness emergency. Too many families lack access to therapeutic recreational facilities." She smiled like she'd solved world hunger. "Your pool represents the perfect solution." Jim shifted uncomfortably. "Anastasia, I'm not sure we can just declare The bylaws are very clear," she interrupted. "Emergency powers allow for temporary community use of private amenities when public welfare is at stake." I studied the document she'd handed me. Dense legal language, multiple amendments, official-looking signatures, but something felt wrong. The formatting was inconsistent. Some signatures looked newer than others. That's when I remembered something my property attorney mentioned during the home purchase. The original HOA documents should be filed with the county, public record. "I'd like to see the original bylaws," I said. Anastasia's smile faltered for just a second. "These are the current bylaws, as amended by the board." "When were they amended?" "Recently, after careful deliberation about community needs." "How recently?" The pause lasted too long. Jim noticed it too, and Michelle was studying the document with a math teacher's eye for inconsistencies. "That's not really relevant," Anastasia said finally. "What matters is current policy." But I'd already seen what I needed to see. The amendments weren't just recent, they were rushed, sloppy, desperate. Which meant somewhere in the county records office was documentation that would tell a very different story about HOA emergency powers and community use provisions. "I'll need to review this with my attorney," I told them. "Of course," Anastasia said sweetly. "But please understand, the emergency declaration is already in effect. We'll be resuming community wellness activities this weekend." After they left, I called my property lawyer. David Tatum had handled my home purchase, a sharp guy who specialized in HOA disputes. "Max, I need to tell you something about HOA emergency powers. They're extremely limited, require unanimous board approval, and definitely can't be used to seize private property for commercial use. If someone's trying to invoke emergency authority for this, they're either ignorant of the law or banking on you being ignorant of it." That night, I drove to the county records office website and requested copies of the original Emerald Hills HOA documents. Filed in 1995, 28 years of amendments, all carefully documented. I also started making phone calls. Other homeowners in the neighborhood. Quiet conversations about their experiences with Anastasia's community initiatives. What I found made my blood run cold. She'd tried this before, 3 times. Robert Tatum's tennis court became a community sports facility for 6 months until he moved away. Lisa Martinez's workshop space got shared for neighborhood craft classes until she couldn't afford the insurance liability. David Kim's garden became community green space until he sold his house. Each time, Anastasia used the same playbook. Emergency declarations, community welfare, social pressure, and eventually financial pressure until people gave up. But here's what she didn't know. Those families had moved. I wasn't moving. And unlike them, I had something she couldn't touch: medical ethics training, surgical precision, and the absolute certainty that sometimes the right thing to do is cut out the cancer before it spreads. 3 days later, Anastasia escalated beyond HOA politics into something that felt like warfare. I was reviewing patient files when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Dr. Stone, this is Janet Walsh from the State Medical Board. We've received a complaint regarding your fitness for practice. My stomach dropped into my shoes. The State Medical Board doesn't call unless something serious has landed on their desk. What kind of complaint? Allegations of unstable behavior, inappropriate conduct with minors, and potential substance abuse. The complaint suggests you've been behaving erratically in your community, creating unsafe situations around children, and showing signs of professional impairment. The taste of bile filled my mouth. Anastasia hadn't just gone after my property. She'd gone after my medical license. Ma'am, I can assure you these allegations are completely false. I believe this is related to a civil dispute with my HOA president. That may be, doctor, but we're required to investigate. You'll receive formal notification this week and we'll need to schedule an interview. After I hung up, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot for 20 minutes trying to process what had just happened. Anastasia had found the one weapon that could destroy everything I'd built, attack my medical career, and the house goes, the pool goes, and the kids lose their safe space forever. But she wasn't finished. That evening, I found a notice taped to my front door. Emergency HOA assessment, $2,000 due within 10 days for community wellness infrastructure development. $2,000 for improvements to property I didn't approve, for amenities I didn't want, to fund parties I'd specifically forbidden. The notice included a breakdown that would have been funny if it weren't devastating. Pool area safety upgrades, $500. Community access pathway construction, $800. Emergency wellness equipment, $700. Translation: they were billing me to modify my own property for other people's use. I called David Tatum immediately. Max, this is bad. They can't charge you for modifications to your property without your consent, but fighting it could take months, and if you don't pay, they can place a lien on your house. That weekend, Anastasia held her second community wellness event. This time, she'd invited local media. Channel 7 News ran a feature story about innovative HOA wellness initiatives. The segment showed smiling families enjoying community therapeutic facilities while a voiceover praised forward-thinking leadership that prioritizes public health over individual property rights. They interviewed Anastasia, who looked radiant in a white sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. We believe that private amenities in our community should serve the greatest good, she told the camera. When someone hoards resources that could benefit disabled children and families in need, we have a moral obligation to intervene. The story painted me as the villain, the selfish doctor who refused to share his pool with disabled kids. No mention of my actual therapy program. No context about the commercial operation she was running, just the narrative she wanted. Community good versus individual greed. Within hours, the story went viral on social media. Pool justice started trending. Thousands of people sharing their outrage about the greedy doctor who wouldn't help disabled children. My DMs filled with hate mail, people calling me everything from heartless to evil, death threats from strangers who knew nothing about the actual situation. But buried in all that noise, I found something unexpected. Messages from other people who'd dealt with HOA abuse. Homeowners who'd been bullied, manipulated, or financially destroyed by board members who believed position meant ownership. One message stood out, from Lisa Martinez, whose workshop had been shared until she couldn't afford to stay. She did the same thing to me, exact same playbook. Emergency declarations, social pressure, media manipulation. But I found something before I moved. Original HOA documents that prove she's been forging amendments. If you want to fight this, I can help. That night, I met Lisa at a coffee shop 20 minutes away from Emerald Hills. She brought a box of documents that told a story even worse than I'd imagined. Anastasia hadn't just been forging recent amendments. She'd been systematically altering HOA documents for 3 years, creating fake emergency powers, fake community use provisions, and fake board approvals. She targets people who won't fight back, Lisa explained. New residents who don't know the original rules, elderly homeowners who can't afford lawyers, people going through divorces or medical crises. Why didn't you report this? Lisa's laugh was bitter. To who? She owns the city council member who oversees HOA complaints. Her family donated a wing to the courthouse. Her husband sits on the police foundation board. But as Lisa spread out the documents, I saw something she'd missed. Something that changed everything. The original 1995 HOA charter included a provision she hadn't noticed. Any amendments to community use policies required not just board approval, but approval from affected property owners. Every single one of Anastasia's fake amendments was automatically invalid. More than that, the original documents explicitly stated that private residential amenities remained exclusively private property, regardless of community benefit. Anastasia hadn't just been lying about her authority, she'd been committing fraud, multiple felonies, for 3 years, and I had the evidence to prove it. Monday morning, I walked into David Tatum's law office carrying Lisa's box of documents and a recording device that had been running during every conversation with Anastasia. "David, I need you to see something." For 2 hours, we spread documents across his conference table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle depicting systematic fraud. The original 1995 HOA charter, Anastasia's forged amendments, bank records showing unauthorized assessments, insurance policies that had been canceled without homeowner notification. "Jesus Christ, Max!" David's voice carried the particular tone lawyers use when they realize they're looking at criminal activity. "This isn't just HOA overreach. This is organized fraud." The picture that emerged was worse than I'd imagined. Anastasia had been running a sophisticated scam for 3 years, targeting 8 homeowners across 3 different HOA communities. Her method was precise: move into upscale neighborhoods, buy her way onto HOA boards through donations and influence, then systematically appropriate private amenities for commercial use. Tennis courts became community sports facilities. Home workshops became shared maker spaces. Private pools became therapeutic wellness centers. Each time she collected membership fees, event charges, and rental income from properties she didn't own, using forged documents to claim legal authority she didn't have. "Look at this," David said, pointing to a spreadsheet Lisa had compiled. "She's generated over $300,000 in revenue from stolen amenities over 3 years. But the financial fraud was just the beginning. The insurance records showed something even more damaging. Anastasia had been canceling homeowners' liability policies without their knowledge, replacing them with commercial policies that didn't cover the actual property owners. If anyone had been injured at one of her events, the homeowner would have been personally liable for millions in damages while their insurance company denied coverage," David explained. She was literally destroying people's financial futures for party money. The state medical board complaint made sense now too. It wasn't just harassment, it was part of a pattern. When homeowners resisted her takeovers, Anastasia would attack their professional reputations, their credit ratings, their family relationships. She destroyed Robert Tatum's engineering consulting business with fake safety complaints, Lisa had told me, cost him 6 figures in lost contracts before he gave up and moved. But as David and I studied the documents, we found something else, something that changed the entire power dynamic. Anastasia had made a critical mistake. In her rush to legitimize the pool takeover, she'd filed forged HOA amendments with the county records office. Not just internal HOA documents, but official legal filings that carried felony penalties for fraud. "This is federal wire fraud territory," David said, pulling up U.S. code on his computer, using electronic communications to perpetrate organized fraud schemes across state lines. She's facing potential RICO charges. RICO, Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. The kind of charges usually reserved for organized crime families. "How sure are you about the evidence?" I asked. "Document fraud, wire fraud, racketeering, tax evasion. She's been reporting this income on her taxes as HOA management consulting. But there's more." David had made some phone calls that morning. To the state attorney general's office, to the FBI's white-collar crime division, to investigative journalists who specialized in municipal corruption. "The federal investigation started 6 months ago," he told me. "Anonymous tips from other victims. They've been building a case, waiting for the right moment to move." What does that mean for me? It means you're not fighting Anastasia anymore. You're helping the federal government take down a criminal enterprise. That afternoon, I got a call from Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI Financial Crimes Division. "Dr. Stone, we understand you're experiencing difficulties with Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross. We'd like to discuss how you might assist our ongoing investigation." We met at a nondescript coffee shop, and Agent Mitchell explained the scope of what they'd uncovered. 12 homeowners across 4 states, over $500,000 in fraudulent revenue, bribery of municipal officials, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. She's gotten away with this because she targets people who can't fight back effectively, Mitchell explained. Elderly homeowners who don't understand their rights, immigrants who fear authority, people going through personal crises. Why me then? I can afford lawyers. Because you're the first person she's targeted who has both the resources to fight back and the community standing to expose her publicly. Your medical reputation gives you credibility she can't attack successfully. Agent Mitchell slid a document across the table. We'd like to ask for your cooperation in a controlled operation. Let her proceed with her planned events while we document everything. Give us the evidence we need for ironclad federal charges. The thought of watching Anastasia continue to destroy my sanctuary while federal agents built their case made my stomach turn. But then I thought about Robert Tatum's lost business, Lisa Martinez's forced move, all the other families who'd been destroyed by this woman's greed. What do you need me to do? Just keep being yourself. But when she calls her next community event, we'll be watching and recording and building the case that puts her away for 20 years. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. The next 2 weeks transformed my property into something that would have made Tony Stark proud. Agent Mitchell connected me with a security company that specialized in federal investigations. Within 3 days, my entire property was wired with cameras that could read license plates from 100 yards away and microphones sensitive enough to pick up whispered conversations by the pool. But the real masterpiece was the gate system. Commercial-grade electronic locks with individual vehicle tracking, explained Marcus Thompson, the lead technician. Each car gets tagged when it enters. RFID sensors monitor every vehicle location. And here's the beautiful part. You can selectively lock individual cars while letting others pass freely. The system used remote-controlled bollards that rose from the ground at multiple exit points. Once activated, they created an impenetrable barrier that could contain dozens of vehicles without affecting foot traffic. It's the same technology used to secure federal buildings, Thompson continued, but designed for residential properties with security concerns. The installation was invisible. Hidden bollards, concealed sensors, cameras that looked like landscape lighting. From the outside, my property looked exactly the same, but underneath, it had become a precision trap. I'd learned something important during my years in trauma surgery. The most effective interventions look effortless from the outside, but underneath, they're supported by layers of preparation, backup systems, and contingency plans that account for every possible variable. David Tatum had been building our legal strategy with the same surgical precision. 8 victim homeowners agreed to coordinate testimony. Original HOA documents were certified by 3 independent document examiners. Financial records were analyzed by forensic accountants who specialized in fraud cases. The beauty of Anastasia's scheme is also its weakness, David explained. She's been so systematic that the evidence trail is undeniable. Every forged document, every fraudulent assessment, every fake emergency declaration is meticulously documented. The financial calculation was staggering. Across all victims, Anastasia had generated $847,000 in fraudulent revenue while causing over $3 million in damages to homeowners who'd been forced to sell, relocate, or rebuild their businesses. In federal court, we're looking at treble damages plus punitive awards, David continued. She could be personally liable for over $7 million in civil judgments, assuming she has any assets left after criminal forfeiture. But the real ammunition came from an unexpected source. Dr. Emily Rodriguez, a forensic psychiatrist who specialized in white-collar crime. Anastasia exhibits classic psychopathic traits, Dr. Rodriguez explained during our consultation. Grandiose sense of self-worth, lack of empathy, parasitic lifestyle, pathological lying. But more importantly, she shows escalating behavior patterns typical of serial offenders. What does that mean practically? She can't stop. The fraud isn't just about money, it's about power and control, which means she'll keep escalating until she's either stopped by force or destroys herself through overreach. Rodriguez was right. 2 days later, Anastasia announced her biggest event yet, the Midsummer Aquatic Wellness Gala. 200 invited guests, professional catering, live entertainment, and a special appearance by the mayor, who would be presenting Anastasia with a Community Service Award for her wellness initiatives. The event fee was $200 per person. Total potential revenue, $240,000, all from my property without my permission, using forged documents to claim authority she'd never had. Agent Mitchell was ecstatic when I called with the details. This is perfect. Public event, multiple witnesses, elected officials present, massive financial fraud documented in real time. She's going to hand us everything we need for RICO charges. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Let Anastasia proceed with her gala. Document every aspect of the fraud. Then activate the trap when maximum witnesses were present and maximum evidence had been generated. We'll have federal agents positioned as catering staff and guests, Mitchell explained. Local police will be on standby for arrest warrants, and we've coordinated with Channel 7 News to cover what they think is a community interest story. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and we wouldn't have sufficient evidence. Too late, and guests might leave before arrests could be made. We activate when she gives her speech accepting the Community Service Award, I decided. Maximum audience, maximum arrogance, maximum evidence of fraud, captured on live television. 3 days before the event, I got the final pieces of equipment. A remote control device that looked like a garage door opener, but controlled the entire security system. One button to lock all exit points, another button to activate recording devices, a third button to signal federal agents. I also received something unexpected. A letter from Sarah Martinez, the 8-year-old with muscular dystrophy who'd been using my pool for therapy twice a week. Dr. Max, she'd written in careful second-grade handwriting, thank you for helping me swim. My legs don't hurt in your pool. I hope the mean lady doesn't take it away. The letter reminded me why this fight mattered. It wasn't about my property rights or Anastasia's fraud. It was about protecting spaces where vulnerable people could heal. The night before the gala, I walked around my pool one last time. Tomorrow, it would become a crime scene. But tonight, it was still a sanctuary. The smell of chlorine mixed with the jasmine growing along my fence. The sound of the filtration system humming quietly. The sight of underwater lights creating patterns on the bottom that kids loved to chase during therapy sessions. In 18 hours, this peaceful space would become the center of a federal fraud investigation that would be broadcast live on television and analyzed by lawyers for years to come. But for now, it was just a pool where broken kids learned to move without pain, and that was worth fighting for. The morning of the gala brought news that made me question whether Anastasia had finally lost touch with reality completely. My phone rang at 6 a.m. David Tatum's voice was tight with disbelief. Max, you need to see the morning paper. Front page. The headline read, Local Doctor Investigated for Child Endangerment. The story, bylined by a journalist I'd never heard of, painted a picture of me as an unstable physician who'd been behaving erratically around disabled children and refusing to cooperate with community wellness initiatives. The article quoted unnamed sources claiming I'd been aggressive toward families with special needs children, had substance abuse issues that affected my medical practice, and was being investigated by both the State Medical Board and Child Protective Services. Every single word was a lie, but printed in black and white, with the weight of journalistic authority behind it, the lies looked disturbingly like truth. How the hell did this get published? I asked David. Money. Anastasia's Family Foundation donates heavily to the paper's charity initiatives. Plus, the reporter is married to someone on her event planning staff. But the newspaper was just the opening act. At 9 a.m., 2 CPS investigators showed up at my house with a court order to inspect my property for potential safety hazards related to the therapeutic pool program. Dr. Stone, we've received reports that you may be operating an unlicensed therapy facility for minors without proper safety protocols or background checks. I explained about the legitimate medical program, showed them insurance documents and safety certifications, provided contact information for the pediatric rehabilitation specialists who supervise sessions. But that wasn't the point. The point was the timing. CPS investigations, even unfounded ones, take weeks to resolve. By the time I was cleared, the pool program would be shut down, the kids would lose their therapy space, and Anastasia would have achieved her goal through bureaucratic warfare. We're going to need to suspend any therapeutic activities pending our investigation, the lead investigator told me, for the children's safety. At 11 a.m., my hospital administration called another meeting. More concerned citizen calls, more questions about my fitness for practice, more pressure to resolve the community situation before it affected the hospital's reputation. Max, I'm not saying there's merit to these allegations, Dr. Richards said carefully, but the volume of complaints is concerning. We may need to consider administrative leave pending resolution. Administrative leave, medical career death sentence. Once you're suspended pending investigation, other hospitals won't touch you. Even if you're cleared, the suspicion follows you forever. At 1 p.m., I discovered that Anastasia had filed a restraining order against me. Petitioner fears for her safety due to respondent's escalating erratic behavior and verbal threats, the court filing read. Respondent has shown signs of mental instability and has made statements suggesting intent to disrupt community events. The restraining order prohibited me from being within 100 feet of Anastasia or any HOA events. Since the gala was being held on my property, the legal effect was to ban me from my own backyard during the fraud I was trying to expose. She's not just covering her tracks, Agent Mitchell told me over an encrypted phone call. She's trying to remove you as a witness entirely. But that afternoon brought the most devastating blow yet. I was reviewing patient files when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah Martinez's mother. Dr. Stone, I'm so sorry to call, but we won't be able to continue Sarah's therapy sessions. My heart sank. Sarah was 8 years old with muscular dystrophy. The warm water therapy was the only exercise that didn't cause her pain. Maria, if this is about the news stories, I can assure you, it's not that. Her voice cracked. It's the insurance. Our insurance company called this morning. They said therapy at your facility is no longer covered because you're operating without proper licensing. Anastasia hadn't just attacked me professionally and legally. She'd gone after my patients by manipulating their insurance coverage. How many families got that call? All of them. 12 families. Every child who uses your pool for therapy. After I hung up, I sat in my office staring at the wall for 10 minutes. 12 kids with disabilities, losing their therapy space because a trust fund psychopath wanted to throw parties in my backyard. The taste of rage was familiar now, the metallic flavor that filled my mouth every time Anastasia found a new way to hurt vulnerable people for her own benefit. But this time, the rage came with something else. Clarity. I called Agent Mitchell back. The restraining order, the CPS investigation, the insurance manipulation, she's not just trying to silence me, she's eliminating evidence. If I can't access my property and the kids can't use the pool, there's no proof of the legitimate medical program she's destroying. That's exactly right, and it's also exactly the kind of obstruction of justice that adds years to federal sentences. What do? We let her think she's won. The restraining order actually works in our favor. You'll be safely away from the property when we execute arrests. No chance of you being caught in the crossfire. That evening, I drove past my house to see the gala setup in progress. Professional catering trucks, staging equipment, security personnel. A red carpet leading from the street to my pool area. Valet parking stations set up on my driveway. My sanctuary had been transformed into a crime scene that didn't know it was a crime scene yet. But hidden in landscape lighting and underground bollards, federal surveillance equipment was capturing every detail. Every fraudulent transaction, every forged document presented to guests, every moment of criminal conspiracy happening in real time. The smell of expensive catering mixed with pool chemicals carried on the evening air. Soon, that smell would be joined by the scent of justice being served ice cold. In 6 hours, Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross would discover what happens when you steal from the wrong foster kid. The final 12 hours before the gala played out like watching a master criminal choreograph her own destruction. At 6 a.m., my security cameras captured Anastasia arriving with a professional film crew. Not just for documentation, for marketing, she was creating promotional materials for her next fraud expansion. Welcome to the Vanderbilt Cross Community Wellness Initiative, she told the camera, gesturing grandly at my pool. Today we celebrate the transformation of private luxury into community benefit. The irony was perfect. She was literally filming a confession. Agent Mitchell called with an update that made the morning even more surreal. She's pre-sold memberships to the pool program. 200 annual memberships at $3,000 each. She collected $600,000 in advance fees for access to property she doesn't own. $600,000, stolen from people who thought they were investing in community wellness. It gets worse, Mitchell continued. She's franchising the model. 3 other HOA boards in different states have paid her consulting fees to implement similar community asset optimization programs in their neighborhoods. Anastasia hadn't just created a fraud scheme. She'd created a fraud business model. At 10 a.m., I watched through hidden cameras as she conducted a final walkthrough with someone who introduced himself as a community development specialist from the governor's office. Mrs. Vanderbilt Cross, this initiative represents exactly the kind of innovative public-private partnership our administration wants to promote statewide, the official said. I called Agent Mitchell immediately. Please tell me the governor's office isn't actually endorsing this. They're not. The guy's an actor she hired to play a state official. She's creating fake government endorsements to legitimize the fraud. Impersonating a government official. That was a new federal felony to add to the list. By noon, guests were arriving for what they believed was a legitimate community celebration. The mayor's car pulled up at 12:30, followed by city council members, local business leaders, and media representatives. These weren't criminals. They were good people who'd been manipulated into unknowingly participating in a massive fraud scheme. At 1 p.m., I received a call that changed everything. Dr. Stone, this is Judge Patricia Hawkins. I signed the restraining order against you yesterday, and I need to inform you that it's been vacated. Vacated? Federal agents provided evidence that the restraining order was obtained through fraudulent testimony. Mrs. Vanderbilt Cross is currently being sought for questioning on federal charges. You're free to return to your property. But I wasn't returning to my property. Not yet. Agent Mitchell had been clear. I needed to be safely away when arrests were made to avoid any appearance of vigilante justice. Instead, I drove to the coffee shop 2 miles away and watched the gala coverage on Channel 7 News. We're here at the beautiful Emerald Hills community for what organizers call a groundbreaking celebration of public-private cooperation, the reporter announced, standing next to my pool. Today's event showcases how private amenities can be transformed into community resources that benefit everyone. The camera panned across my backyard, showing 200 elegantly dressed guests mingling around the therapeutic pool where kids with muscular dystrophy had learned to move without pain just weeks before. At 2:30 p.m., the mayor took the microphone to present Anastasia with her Community Service Award. Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross represents the very best of civic leadership, he announced. Her vision of shared community resources and inclusive wellness initiatives sets an example for municipalities nationwide. Anastasia approached the microphone wearing a white designer gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. The cameras zoomed in as she accepted a crystal award engraved with Outstanding Community Service, 2023. Thank you so much for this incredible honor, she began, her voice carrying across my backyard through speakers positioned around the pool. Today represents the triumph of community cooperation over individual selfishness. She paused for applause, smiling radiantly as 200 people celebrated her theft of my property. Too many people believe that private ownership means the right to hoard resources that could benefit everyone, she continued. But true community leaders understand that beautiful spaces belong to beautiful people, and beautiful people share. The crowd applauded again. The cameras recorded every word, and federal agents wearing catering uniforms moved into position around the perimeter. That's why I'm so excited to announce the expansion of our community wellness initiative to 12 additional neighborhoods across 3 states, Anastasia proclaimed. By this time next year, we'll have transformed dozens of private amenities into shared community resources. She was literally announcing her criminal conspiracy on live television. At 2:45 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Agent Mitchell. All units in position. Execute in 60 seconds. I watched through the coffee shop window as unmarked federal vehicles moved into position around my neighborhood. Inside the gala, agents disguised as staff and guests checked their positions. At 2:46 p.m., I pressed a button on the device that looked like a garage door opener. Hidden bollards rose from the ground at every exit point. 37 luxury vehicles were suddenly trapped inside my property with no means of escape. And Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross was about to learn what happens when you steal from someone who fights back. At 2:47 p.m., chaos erupted in paradise. The first indication something was wrong came from the valet parking area. Cars that had been casually positioned for easy exit were now blocked by steel bollards that had risen from the ground like mechanical flowers. Ladies and gentlemen, I heard through my security feed as Agent Mitchell's voice came through hidden speakers. This is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This property is now a crime scene. Please remain calm and follow instructions from federal agents. The transformation was instant and beautiful. People in catering uniforms suddenly produced FBI badges and weapons. Guests who'd been mingling politely revealed themselves as federal agents. The photographer documenting the event was actually a federal evidence technician. But the center of it all was Anastasia, standing at the microphone in her white designer gown, still holding her community service award, her mouth opening and closing like a fish trying to breathe air. "This is shared property!" she screamed, her composure cracking like ice under pressure. "You can't do this! I have rights!" Agent Mitchell approached the makeshift stage with handcuffs visible on her belt. "Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross, you're under arrest for federal wire fraud, mail fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit fraud." "This is ridiculous!" Anastasia's voice pitched higher with each word. "I'm the HOA president. I have authority over community resources." "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." But Anastasia wasn't interested in remaining silent. "Do you know who my father is? Do you know how much money my family donated to this city?" The Channel 7 news crew was capturing every moment. The mayor's face had gone pale as he realized he'd just presented a community service award to a federal criminal. City council members were backing away from the stage like Anastasia had become radioactive. "Let us out!" she shrieked, pointing at the trapped cars. "This is kidnapping! This is false imprisonment!" Agent Mitchell's response was perfectly calibrated for maximum legal impact. "Ma'am, you're on private property that you accessed through fraudulent means. The property owner has every right to control access to his land." That's when Anastasia spotted me. I'd driven back during the arrests and was standing at my fence line, watching federal agents dismantle 3 years of criminal enterprise in my backyard. "You!" she screamed, pointing at me like I was Satan himself. "This is your fault. I was helping the community." "Show me the deed, Anastasia," I called back, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet crowd. "Show me where your daddy's money bought you my property." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of handcuffs clicking closed around her wrists. But Anastasia wasn't finished. Even handcuffed, even surrounded by federal agents, even with 200 witnesses and live television cameras capturing her meltdown, she kept talking. "This is persecution. I was serving the community. Beautiful spaces belong to beautiful people. You're all making a terrible mistake." Agent Mitchell began reading additional charges. "You're also under arrest for impersonating a federal official, obstruction of justice, and violation of federal wire fraud statutes. Additional charges are pending." "Impersonating? I never impersonated anyone." "Sir," Agent Mitchell called to the fake governor's office representative, who was trying to blend into the crowd, "you're also under arrest." As federal agents led both conspirators away, the crowd of guests stood trapped behind my locked gates, watching 3 years of sophisticated fraud unravel in real time. The news crews were having the day of their careers, live arrests at a community event, a trust fund heiress having a complete breakdown on camera, federal agents revealing a multi-state fraud conspiracy in real time. This is Channel 7 News with breaking coverage of what appears to be one of the largest HOA fraud schemes in state history, the reporter announced. Federal agents have just arrested HOA President Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross and an accomplice for what sources describe as a sophisticated criminal enterprise targeting multiple communities. The cameras panned across the scene, handcuffed defendants being loaded into federal vehicles, trapped luxury cars behind steel bollards, guests in formal wear being questioned by FBI agents, and at the center of it all, the therapeutic pool that had started the whole war. According to federal sources, Mrs. Vanderbilt Cross allegedly generated over $800,000 in fraudulent revenue by claiming unauthorized control over private property in multiple HOA communities, the reporter continued. As the last federal vehicle drove away with Anastasia inside, I walked to the gate control and pressed the button to lower the bollards. 37 expensive cars started their engines simultaneously and drove away from my property as quickly as legally possible. The mayor approached me as the crowd dispersed. "Dr. Stone, I want to personally apologize. We had no idea about the fraud. The city will be reviewing all our policies regarding HOA oversight." "Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate that." What I didn't say was that the apology felt good, but not as good as watching a trust fund psychopath learn that money can't buy immunity from consequences. Agent Mitchell was the last to leave. "Dr. Stone, I want you to know that your cooperation made this case possible. She was destroying families, and you stopped her. As the sun set over my backyard, I looked at the pool that had caused so much conflict. Tomorrow, 12 kids with disabilities would return for their therapy sessions. The sanctuary had been defended. The smell of chlorine mixed with jasmine carried on the evening air, no longer contaminated by expensive wine and entitlement, just the clean scent of water where broken things learn to heal. 6 months later, justice arrived with the precision of surgical stitches and the permanence of scar tissue. Anastasia Vanderbilt Cross was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison plus $2 million in restitution. The judge specifically noted that her systematic exploitation of vulnerable homeowners for personal gain warranted maximum penalties under federal fraud statutes. Her accomplices received shorter sentences, but the fake government official got 18 months for impersonating a federal employee. The bribed city officials faced separate corruption charges that ended their careers and cost them their pensions. But the real satisfaction wasn't the criminal convictions, it was the civil lawsuit. Our class action settlement awarded $4.7 million to the 12 families Anastasia had victimized across 4 states. The money came from seizure and sale of her family estate, her luxury cars, and even the jewelry she'd worn to fraudulently accept community service awards. My portion was $340,000. More money than I'd spent building the pool, enough to upgrade every system and expand the therapy programs to serve twice as many kids. Dr. Stone, this settlement allows us to create something unprecedented, explained Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the pediatric rehabilitation specialist who now helped coordinate our programs. A fully equipped therapeutic facility that serves underserved families at no cost. The new equipment was impressive. Specialized lifts for children with severe mobility limitations, underwater treadmills for gait training, temperature control systems that could adjust water warmth for different therapeutic needs. But the best upgrade was invisible. Peace of mind, legal protection, the certainty that no trust fund princess could ever again turn a healing space into her personal ATM. The federal court settlement included provisions that went far beyond my property, new regulations requiring transparency in HOA decision-making, mandatory audits for any community assessments over $500, criminal penalties for HOA board members who forge documents or claim authority they don't possess. The Vanderbilt Cross case created legal precedents that protect homeowners nationwide, David Tatum explained. She inadvertently strengthened property rights for everyone. The ripple effects were remarkable. 3 other fraud schemes in different states were exposed when victims came forward after seeing news coverage of Anastasia's downfall. 2 additional federal investigations were launched. An entire network of property theft masquerading as community development was systematically dismantled. But the most meaningful changes happened right in my backyard. Sarah Martinez returned for therapy sessions the week after Anastasia's arrest. Her first question was simple. Dr. Max, is the mean lady really gone? She's gone forever, sweetheart. The pool is safe. Good. I like swimming without being scared. Within 3 months, our program expanded from 12 children to 37. Word spread through pediatric rehabilitation networks across the region. Families drove hours to access therapy in an environment where kids felt safe and welcome. We established the Earned versus Entitled Scholarship Fund using a portion of the settlement money, $25,000 annually for foster children pursuing medical careers. The first recipient was Marcus Williams, an 18-year-old aging out of foster care who wanted to become a pediatric physical therapist. I know what it feels like to have people decide your story without asking your opinion, he told me during his interview. I want to help kids who need advocates. The local impact was equally significant. The City Council implemented new oversight procedures for HOA operations. The newspaper issued a formal apology for publishing unverified accusations and established new editorial standards for community reporting. Channel 7 News won a state journalism award for their coverage of the fraud scheme. The reporter who'd initially covered Anastasia's community wellness initiatives later produced a documentary about HOA abuse that aired nationally. Most importantly, Emerald Hills became a different kind of community. Not one controlled by wealth and intimidation, but one that actually served its residents' needs. The neighborhood installed a real community pool using funds from the federal settlement. But unlike Anastasia's theft, this one was built through transparent democracy, funded through voluntary contributions, and managed by elected volunteers who actually cared about community welfare. 18 months after the arrests, I stood by my pool watching Sarah Martinez practice swimming strokes that would have been impossible before therapy. Her mother sat in a chair nearby, no longer worried about insurance coverage or legal threats. "Dr. Stone," Sarah called from the water, "look, I can swim all the way across." I watched her move through water that had been contaminated by greed and entitlement but was now clean again. The chlorine smelled exactly right. The temperature was perfect for healing, and the only sounds were children laughing and water gently lapping against tiles. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Agent Mitchell. "Saw the news about your therapy program expansion. Congratulations on building something beautiful from something ugly." She was right. We'd taken a space that had been stolen and traumatized and turned it into something stronger than before, a sanctuary that couldn't be bought, sold, or taken away by people who believed money meant ownership of everything. Before I went inside, I walked one more lap around the pool where broken things learned to heal. Tomorrow, 37 kids would return for therapy. Next month, we'd welcome 10 more families. Next year, we might need to expand again. The taste of justice was better than any expensive wine Anastasia had ever spilled in these waters. Got your own entitled neighbor nightmare? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and the best stories might become future episodes. And if you want to see more trust fund parasites get what they deserve, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're just getting started with these takedowns.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.